A middle-class dream in the 1960s often looked like a modest ranch house sitting in a tidy suburb. A neat green lawn out front, a two-car driveway, and maybe a flagpole by the curb. Nothing fancy, but owning that slice of America felt like proof you'd made it. Steady job, safe home, and room to grow. Buying a brand new Chevy, Ford, or Plymouth every few years was suddenly possible for the average family. Financing stretched out the payments, and having a shiny car in the driveway felt like the badge of middle-class success. Each model year brought chrome, tail fins, or new colors, and Dad proudly parked it where the neighbors could admire. Shopping at Sears or J.C. Penney covered just about every need. Clothes, tools, appliances, even toys could be found under one roof or ordered through their thick catalogs. For middle-class families, these stores felt dependable and affordable, the go-to stop for both Sunday shoes and Dad's toolbox. The catalog itself often doubled as a Christmas wish book for kids. One middle-class income supported a home, a car, kids in school, and vacations, a balance that feels remarkable now. Fathers worked steady jobs, mothers managed households, and together they built stability. It wasn't about wealth, but security, the quiet confidence that tomorrow could be counted on. That, above all, defined middle-class life in the 1960s America. Gas was around 35 cents a gallon, a price middle-class families counted on. Filling the tank didn't drain a paycheck, and weekend drives or long road trips stayed within reach. Service station attendants checked oil, washed windshields, and waved you off with a smile. Cars weren't just transportation. They were freedom, and the price of freedom felt fair. Middle-class pride often showed in the kitchen. Parents would point to their brand-new General Electric or Maytag appliances as if they were trophies of success. Shiny fridges, automatic washers, and gleaming ovens weren't just tools. They were proof the family had climbed a rung higher. Neighbors came by to admire, and moms swapped stories about which brand lasted longer. Bowling alleys were buzzing with middle-class families. Dads bowled frames with co-workers, moms cheered behind, and kids begged for another soda from the counter. League nights filled the calendar, trophies lined shelves, and a perfect game earned bragging rights for years. In the 1960s, bowling was more than sport. It was a weekly family outing. Every fall meant a trip to the Five and Dime for fresh notebooks, pencils, and a box of crayons. Middle-class parents stretched dollars but made sure kids started the year right. Those aisles smelled of erasers and ink, and nothing beat the feeling of heading to school with supplies tucked neatly in a brand-new satchel. Middle-class workers expected to retire with a pension that came straight from their employer. Just steady years of loyalty, and the company would look after you in the end. It wasn't perfect, but it gave families a peace of mind few middle-class households feel today. Retirement was predictable, even comfortable. Saturdays often meant Dad out in the driveway with the hood up on the family car, wrenches, oil cans, and rags spread out as he tuned the engine or replaced a belt. Kids hung around, learning by watching. For middle-class fathers, keeping the car running wasn't just thrift. It was part of their role as provider and fixer. Television was the glowing heart of the living room. At first, most families had a black and white set, with kids fiddling with rabbit ears. As prices dropped, upgrading to color became the middle-class milestone. Suddenly, shows popped with bright hues, and inviting neighbors over to watch a color broadcast felt like showing off a piece of the future. Dinner wasn't just about food, it was about family. Each night, families gathered around the table for a hot meal, usually some combination of meat, potatoes, and vegetables. The TV stayed off, and everyone had a seat. In middle-class homes, dinner was the anchor of the day, a time when parents caught up and kids reported on school. Fathers sat at the kitchen table balancing checkbooks, fountain pen in hand, while kids worked on spelling lists or math. Every expense was written line by line, every deposit noted carefully. For middle-class families, it wasn't just numbers, it was the rhythm of responsibility. Those ledgers told the story of a household kept steady. Public schools were a point of pride for middle-class families in the 60s. Fully funded, disciplined, and right in the neighborhood, they gave parents peace of mind. Teachers were respected, classrooms orderly, and parents trusted the schools to prepare kids for the future. Back then, a local school was more than education. It was a cornerstone of community. The backyard barbecue was a middle-class stage. Charcoal grills smoked, lawn chairs unfolded, and kids ran barefoot through the grass. Moms poured lemonade from Tupperware pitchers, dads flipped burgers, and neighbors drifted over with side dishes. These casual get-togethers captured the heart of 1960s suburban life. Food, laughter, and the smell of charcoal hanging in the summer air. Many dads brought home pay envelopes stuffed with cash before banks and direct deposit took over. Opening that envelope on Friday meant bills could be paid and groceries bought, with maybe a little left for the movies. For middle-class families, payday was a weekly rhythm, steady and predictable, the kind of security every household depended on. Bills were paid by hand. Middle-class families wrote checks at the kitchen table, sealed envelopes, and licked stamps. No online banking, no apps, just a steady ritual of balancing the checkbook and dropping bills in the mailbox. It took time, but it also gave people a clear sense of where their money went, dollar by dollar. Working overtime or grabbing side shifts was a common middle-class strategy to afford extras. Maybe a vacation, maybe a second car. Fathers quietly stretched their hours so the family could enjoy more. Moms and kids noticed, but it was simply understood. Hard work was the engine of middle-class life, and sometimes that meant long nights and tired mornings. The local drive-in theater was magic. Families packed the car with blankets, pillows, and kids in pajamas. Screens lit up the night sky, and tinny speakers hung on rolled-down windows. It was affordable, fun, and middle-class families loved it. Parents watched from the front seat, kids from the back, and everyone left with popcorn crumbs and tired smiles. The hi-fi stereo cabinet stood tall in the living room, polished wood gleaming. Records of Elvis, Sinatra, or the Beatles spun while families gathered to listen. It wasn't just music, it was culture, coming straight into middle-class homes. For many, owning a hi-fi was as much about pride as it was about sound, proof they were keeping up. Bridge clubs, church socials, and neighborhood gatherings filled the calendar. Middle-class families found community in card games, potlucks, and dances. Moms hosted in tidy living rooms, dads chatted about work or politics, and kids ran underfoot. These gatherings weren't just entertainment. They wove the fabric of suburban life, keeping neighbors close and making everyone feel they belonged. Magazines like Life and Reader's Digest, stacked neatly on the coffee table, told the story of the middle class. They shaped opinions, inspired conversations, and gave families a shared window into culture and current events. Flipping through glossy photos or chuckling over condensed articles was part of the routine, proof that keeping informed was a marker of success. Eating TV dinners was a novelty. Folding trays popped open in front of the television, and aluminum trays of Salisbury steak, peas, and mashed potatoes went into the oven. Families treated it like a futuristic indulgence. Middle-class parents saw it as convenience. Kids saw it as fun. And everyone loved the chance to eat while watching their favorite shows. Sunday mornings meant families in their best clothes, church pews filled, hymns sung. Afterward, a big lunch, maybe roast chicken, potatoes, and pie, anchored the day. For middle-class families, church was more than faith. It was community, rhythm, and belonging. The weekly ritual tied families together in ways that stretched far beyond the service itself. One bathroom served the whole family, and mornings meant kids lined up, toothbrushes and towels in hand. Arguments over hot water were routine, but everyone managed. In middle-class homes, space was limited and privacy scarce. Still, families made it work, and those cramped bathroom mornings became part of the shared memory of growing up together. Health insurance came through the workplace, often simple enough to fit on a single sheet of paper. Middle-class families didn't agonize over deductibles or networks. A doctor's visit was affordable, and hospital stays didn't mean financial ruin. That sense of security, that you could care for your family without breaking the bank, was a quiet middle-class comfort. One secure job was often expected to last decades. Whether in a factory, an office, or a shop, middle-class breadwinners counted on steady work and reliable pensions. Careers weren't about hopping from place to place. They were about loyalty and security. For many families, that long-term stability was the bedrock of middle-class life in the 1960s. When the moon landing broadcast in 1969, whole families gathered around the television, eyes wide and hearts pounding. Kids sat cross-legged on the floor. Parents leaned forward in silence. For middle-class America, it felt like their tax dollars, their hard work, had reached the stars. Pride filled living rooms that night, and for once, the future seemed limitless. Fathers headed off each morning in pressed shirts, ties neatly knotted, while mothers often stayed home running the household. The roles were clear, and so was the rhythm. Lunch boxes for the kids, coffee for dad, chores, and shopping for mom. It was a middle-class routine that gave families stability, even if expectations felt strict by today's standards. The neighborhood seemed alive with kids. Bikes rattled over sidewalks, kickball games filled the streets, and the simple rule was to head home when the streetlights flickered on. Middle-class suburbs of the 1960s were noisy, with laughter, games, and the constant whirl of wheels. Parents didn't hover. They just knew their kids would come back dusty and hungry. Vacation meant piling into the station-wagon, windows rolled down, maps folded across the dashboard. Middle-class families drove to national parks, roadside motels, or beach cabins. No first-class flights, just long roads, gas stops, and picnic lunches along the way. For the average family, those road trips were both affordable and unforgettable, etched into memory as America on wheels. Duck and cover drills were part of growing up. In middle-class schools, kids tucked under desks or crouched in hallways, pretending it would save them from a nuclear blast. The Cold War loomed heavy, but families carried on with their routines. A single rotary telephone often sat in the hallway or kitchen, sometimes shared with neighbors on a party line. Middle-class families learned patience waiting for their turn, and conversations were short to save on long-distance costs. That phone was a lifeline. Birthday wishes, work calls, and neighborhood news, all routed through one heavy handset and a coiled cord. Family entertainment didn't require screens. Board games like Monopoly, Sorry, and Life came out on coffee tables after dinner. Dice rolled, tokens clattered, and laughter filled the room. For middle-class families, those nights cost nothing but time, and the memories stretched far. Losing to Dad in Monopoly or watching Mom get every sorry card became household legends. College didn't require crushing debt in the 1960s. A middle-class salary could often cover tuition outright or with just a summer job. Parents proudly sent kids to state schools, sometimes making them the first in the family to graduate. The idea was simple. Work hard, study hard, and education would pay off, without a mountain of loans. Christmas shopping meant saving all year and paging through department store catalogs. Kids circled toys in pencil months ahead, dreaming of train sets, dolls, and bicycles. Parents budgeted carefully, stretching middle-class paychecks just far enough. By December, the wrapped packages under the tree weren't just gifts. They were proof that sacrifice and steady planning paid off. Hand-me-down clothes were a fact of middle-class life. Older siblings' shirts and dresses got patched, hemmed, and passed along, often altered by Mom on the family sewing machine. It wasn't seen as shameful. It was practical. Mothers took pride in making garments last, and kids knew their Sunday best had probably graced someone else's school picture first. The family doctor wasn't part of a big health network. He was a man in a small office who knew every patient by name. Middle-class families trusted him completely, often seeing him for years. His waiting room had magazines. His bill fit the budget. And when he made house calls, it reminded families that care could feel personal. Walking or biking to school was the norm. Middle-class neighborhoods felt safe enough, and parents rarely worried about kids covering those blocks alone. Friends gathered along the way. trading baseball cards or jokes. And the trip became part of the day's adventure. No carpool lanes, no constant check-ins, just the freedom to get there under your own power. In the early 60s, men still wore hats to work. Fedoras, trilbies, and Homburgs lined the commuter trains and sidewalks. Middle-class fathers didn't feel properly dressed without one. By the mid-decade, styles shifted and bare heads became common. But for years, those hats were part of the uniform of steady jobs and suburban lives. New suburban shopping malls were the pride of middle-class families. Whole weekends were spent walking shiny corridors, grabbing lunch at Woolworth's counter, and browsing endless storefronts. Malls felt futuristic, climate-controlled, and gleaming under fluorescent lights. For middle-class parents, they were safe, clean, and affordable. For kids, they were a playground of escalators, window displays, and endless people watching. Baseball truly was America's pastime. Middle-class families tuned into radio broadcasts or black and white TVs to watch the Yankees, Dodgers, or local teams. Fathers explained the rules, kids kept score in notebooks, and mothers joined the cheers. Baseball wasn't just a sport. It was part of the rhythm of life, tying suburban families to a shared national tradition. Console stereos gleamed in polished wood cabinets, combining radio, record player, and storage into one grand piece of furniture. Middle-class families placed them proudly in the living room, a centerpiece as important as the television. Kids flipped through stacks of 45s. Parents played Sinatra or Armstrong, and the sound of music filled the house with culture and connection. School lunches often started with a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, packed lovingly by moms each morning. A piece of fruit, maybe a cookie, and a thermos of milk rounded it out. Middle-class kids sat in cafeterias trading bites and comparing lunches. Simple, practical, and homemade. Those paper-wrapped sandwiches carried a mother's touch from kitchen to classroom. For many middle-class families, kids were the first to attend college. Tuition was low enough, income strong enough, and opportunities wide enough to make it possible. Parents swelled with pride, sending children to universities they themselves never dreamed of. College wasn't just education. It was proof the middle-class life could push the next generation further. At the start of the decade, most middle-class families made do with a single car. By the end, two-car households became more common. Dad drove to work, while Mom needed a vehicle for shopping, errands, and chauffeuring kid. That second car was a symbol of comfort, convenience, and a middle-class life that was beginning to stretch its reach. Recipe boxes overflowed in middle-class kitchens. Handwritten cards, clipped recipes from magazines, and notes passed down from grandmothers filled them. Every family had favorites: tuna casseroles, Jello salads, or cakes topped with canned pineapple. Moms treasured those boxes, pulling them out night after night. They weren't just instructions. They were little collections of family history. Rabbit ear antennas perched on top of televisions, demanding constant fiddling. Kids stood holding one side while Dad adjusted the other, hoping the snowy picture would clear just long enough for a show. Middle-class families laughed about it, but the ritual was real. the price of having a screen in the living room, even if it flickered. Kool-Aid was the drink of summer. Moms mixed gallons of it in pitchers, stirring sugar by hand until the spoon clinked. Kids came running from yards and ball games, cups in hand. It was cheap, colorful, and refreshing. Middle-class families loved it, and every backyard gathering seemed to have that sweet, syrupy taste of cherry, grape, or lemon lime. Birthday parties meant homemade cakes, ice cream scooped from cardboard tubs, and a circle of friends singing around the table. No big venues or rented entertainers, just living rooms filled with balloons and laughter. Middle-class parents knew how to stretch $1, and kids never noticed the difference. Those simple celebrations felt just as magical. Paperboys were part of the middle-class rhythm. Boys pedaled bikes with canvas bags full of newsprint, tossing rolled papers onto porches. They knocked each week to collect coins, sometimes even handing change back carefully. It was often a kid's first job, teaching responsibility, discipline, and a taste of independence long before driving or real employment came along. Christmas trees shimmered with aluminum tinsel and bubbling lights. Ornaments were glass, fragile as eggs, each year carefully unwrapped from a tissue. Families gathered together to decorate, kids hanging candy canes while parents balanced the strings of lights. The sparkle filled the living room, and for middle-class families, the tree symbolized warmth, tradition, and just enough abundance to make the season glow. Sunday nights belonged to Bonanza. Families planned their evenings around the Cartwright's adventures on the Ponderosa. Dinners finished early, dishes cleared, and kids raced to the living room. Middle-class households treated it like a weekly ritual. One last family gathering before school and work returned Monday. Television became a hearth, and Bonanza made sure families gathered close. Teenagers scraped together gas money and record store change by bagging groceries, running concession stands, or working at the local drive-in. Those part-time jobs gave kids a taste of independence and taught responsibility. A few dollars went further back then, enough for a Friday night out or the newest Beatles album. Middle-class families encouraged it as a step toward adulthood. Backyard swing sets were made of metal pipes that rusted if the rain sat too long. They wobbled, squeaked, and sometimes tipped if kids swung too high. Yet, for middle-class families, they were a badge of success. Proof you had a yard big enough to hold one. Scraped knees healed fast, but the memories lasted longer. Neighborhood block parties brought the whole street together. Each family carried out a casserole, a pie, or a cooler of drinks, and the kids darted around with sparklers as adults lined lawn chairs. Middle-class life in the 60s meant knowing every neighbor by name, and nothing proved it more than sharing food under summer evening skies. Ice cream trucks played jingles that drew children like a magnet. You could hear the melody blocks away, and kids sprinted with dimes clutched tight. Middle-class neighborhoods felt alive when the truck rolled through, neighbors chatting on lawns while kids chose push-ups or drumsticks. That sound was summer itself, a tune you never forget. Potlucks always had a Jello mold on the table. Sometimes fruit was trapped inside, other times marshmallows or whipped topping. Middle-class moms swore by them, flipping those shiny molds upside down with pride. Kids weren't always thrilled, but everyone took a slice. It wasn't just food, it was tradition, colorful and wobbly as the decade itself. Sunday drives were a staple of middle-class life. Families piled into the car with no set destination, just rolling down country lanes or through new neighborhoods. Gas was cheap, time was plentiful, and the drive itself became the outing. Windows rolled down, radio humming. It was leisure wrapped in simplicity, a little escape each week. Parents flipped through the thick Sears wishbook catalog, with kids circling toys in pencil months before Christmas. Pages bent from dreaming, and arguments broke out over which doll or train set might appear under the tree. For middle-class households, that catalog was more than shopping. It was imagination bound between covers, carried through the season. Having a washer and dryer inside the house felt like real middle-class progress. No more lugging baskets to the laundromat. No more waiting for machines. Moms loaded clothes while cooking dinner, and children heard the hum and rattle from down the hall. Those machines saved hours of work, and their presence became a quiet symbol of comfort. Glass jars sat on kitchen counters, slowly filling with nickels, dimes, and quarters. Families called them vacation funds, and kids dropped in spare change whenever they could. By summer, the jars jingled full, and the coins became motel stays or roadside ice creams. Middle-class families dreamed small, practical dreams, and sometimes all it took was loose change. Public swimming pools and YMCA memberships defined summer. For a modest middle-class fee, kids cannonballed into cool blue water while parents stretched out on benches with paperbacks. Chlorine-stung eyes, whistles blew, and sunburns showed up by dinner. The pool wasn't fancy, but it gave families community. Laughter echoing in cement basins filled with sunlight. PF flyers or Ked sneakers were worn until the soles peeled. Middle-class kids prized them for baseball, kickball, and racing bikes. They were simple canvas shoes, affordable but iconic. Mothers scrubbed them white on Saturday mornings, and by Monday they were scuffed again. Those sneakers carried a whole generation through sidewalks, fields, and playground adventures. Parents opened Christmas savings accounts each January, depositing a little at a time so December wouldn't bring panic. It was a middle-class ritual taught by bankers and embraced by households. By the holidays, that envelope of cash felt like a miracle, proof that patience and planning could turn a year of nickels into a season of abundance. Teenagers hung out at soda fountains or diners, sipping Cokes through paper straws and sliding into booths. Middle-class kids found freedom there. Music on the jukebox, fries split 3 ways, and no parents hovering. It wasn't much money, but it felt like independence. Those neon signs and counter stools became the backdrop of young suburban lives. Families planted backyard gardens with tomatoes, beans, and cucumbers. Middle-class parents believed in stretching budgets with fresh produce, and kids learned the rhythm of weeding, watering, and harvesting, Summer dinners tasted better when the vegetables came from your own yard. It wasn't just thrift, it was pride, a piece of self-reliance grown right outside the kitchen door. Seatbelts weren't yet a concern. Kids bounced in the back of cars perched on armrests, even lying across rear windows on long trips. Parents didn't think twice. It was just how families traveled. Middle-class roads were full of wagons stuffed with children, laughter, and the occasional scolding when rough housing got out of hand. Safety came later. Dads loved westerns on television. After dinner, they stretched in recliners while kids sprawled on rugs, watching cowboys ride across the screen. Middle-class families gathered in silence when a gunfight broke out or a hero rode tall. Those shows weren't just entertainment. They were evening rituals, stories of grit and honor that felt timeless in suburban homes. Parents hosted cocktail hours in their own backyards. Neighbors wandered over for martinis or highballs, glasses clinking while kids played tag under porch lights. Middle-class hospitality meant folding chairs, ice buckets, and just enough liquor to loosen laughter. It wasn't glamorous, but it was community. Friendships cemented with drinks and small talk beneath the setting sun. Baseball cards traded hands in schoolyards, corners bent, sticks of gum tucked alongside. Middle-class boys swapped mantles and Koufaxes like treasure, arguing over value with the seriousness of businessmen. Collections grew in shoeboxes, tucked under beds. For kids, the cards weren't just paper. They were connection, bragging rights, and the thrill of chasing that one rare find. The crackle of baseball games on AM radios drifted through middle-class porches and kitchens. Families sat with iced tea, listening to every pitch, imagination filling in the ballpark. Fathers explained plays, kids cheered, mothers sighed at the noise. It was national pastime woven into daily life, carried not by TV yet, but by the warmth of sound. School assemblies opened with the national anthem, sung without hesitation. Kids stood tall, voices filling gymnasiums, and parents trusted schools to reinforce pride. Middle-class America carried patriotism and rituals both big and small. That daily respect for flag and country, simple and unself-conscious, became a thread binding communities tighter than most rules or lessons ever could. Kids gulped water straight from garden hoses on hot afternoons. No bottles, no filters, just cold metal taste and relief. Middle-class summers meant grass-stained knees, sweat-damp shirts, and the squeak of hose reels. That hose quenched thirst better than anything store-bought, and children ran back into games without a thought. Simpler solutions for simpler lives. Suburban garages filled with projects, Sears tools laid across benches, middle-class dads built bookcases, patched bikes, even hammered together homemade go-karts. The garage wasn't just for cars, it was a workshop, a proving ground where fathers taught sons and daughters to measure, cut, and sand. Those projects weren't always perfect, but pride lived in the sawdust. Avon saleswomen rang the doorbell with catalogs and samples in tiny tubes. Middle-class moms leafed through pages at the kitchen table, ordering lipsticks, creams, or perfumes. Avon wasn't just cosmetics. It was connection, conversation, and a touch of luxury delivered right to the doorstep. For many households, that knock at the door felt like glamour arriving. Sunday nights, Ed Sullivan brought new stars into middle-class living rooms. Families sat together as Elvis, the Beatles, or a juggler shared the same stage. The show was a cultural hearth, introducing generations to what was coming next. Fathers nodded, mothers smiled, and kids' jaws dropped. Those evenings proved the world could change right before your eyes. Neighbors borrowed cups of sugar or flour without hesitation. A knock on the back door and a quick trade kept houses running. Middle-class life in the 60s was built on that trust. No one thought twice. It wasn't charity, it was community, and often the borrowed sugar came back later baked into a pie. School dances filled gymnasiums with live local bands, not DJs or playlists. Folding chairs lined the walls, chaperones kept an eye out, and kids swayed awkwardly until the music picked up. For middle-class teens, it was freedom in a safe setting, cheap decorations, paper cups of punch, and the thrill of asking someone to dance. PTA meetings were serious business in the middle class. Parents argued over bake sales, band uniforms, and playground repairs with the same passion as city councils. Moms took notes, dads voiced concerns, and everyone believed schools were worth fighting for. Those evenings shaped communities, proving education wasn't abstract. It was personal, tied to every child's future. Family photos came from Kodak Instamatic cameras, simple little boxes anyone could use. Click, wind, and the moment was frozen. Prints arrived days later in paper envelopes, sometimes blurry but always cherished. Middle-class families lined up in Sunday best, squinting in the sun. Those snapshots filled albums, proof that everyday life was worth preserving one roll at a time. Summer nights meant chasing fireflies with glass jars in the backyard. Kids darted barefoot through grass, screwing on lids with holes punched in them. Middle-class parents watched from porches, listening to crickets and the hum of a quiet neighborhood. It was free entertainment, glowing specks in the dark, simple enough to feel magical and timeless. Everyone trusted the local bank. Savings accounts, Christmas clubs, and small loans were handled face-to-face by tellers who knew your name. Middle-class families relied on that handshake trust, believing money was safe behind those marble counters. No apps, no fees hidden in fine print, just steady banking that worked as predictably as the seasons. Fathers tightened belts and fixed shoes rather than replace them. Middle-class thrift wasn't seen as struggle. It was just how families stretched a dollar. Moms patched clothes, dads hammered loose heels, and kids learned that not everything had to be new. Those small repairs carried dignity, showing care for both the family and the paycheck. Family trips to Disneyland or Six Flags were dreams that came true for many middle-class households. Packed into the station-wagon with a cooler of sandwiches, parents braced for lines and excitement. Kids clutched ticket books, wide-eyed at the sights. It wasn't cheap, but once in a while the middle class got to taste wonder made real. Folk singers and protest music drifted into middle-class homes as the decade went on. Bob Dylan and Joan Baez weren't just for college kids. Their records spun on suburban turntables, lyrics sparking conversations around dinner tables. Fathers shook heads, teenagers nodded along, and America's middle ground felt the pull of change in its very living rooms. Teachers wrote in perfect cursive across chalkboards, the letters flowing in loops that kids tried to copy. Middle-class schools prized neat handwriting, and children filled notebooks with practice lines. That chalk squeak and eraser dust filled classrooms, and parents expected to see polished penmanship in report cards. Good handwriting was a point of pride, not just a skill. Middle-class families often subscribed to multiple magazines, Time, Life, National Geographic. Those glossy covers stacked neatly on coffee tables, proof you were informed. Photos of faraway lands, political debates, and cultural shifts all arrived by mail. Kids flipped through the pictures, parents read the articles, and households stayed connected to the wider world from living rooms. Moms clipped coupons carefully from newspapers each week, scissors snipping columns into neat piles. Middle-class frugality wasn't shameful. It was smart. Those dimes and quarters added up, stretching budgets while keeping cupboards stocked. Kids groaned at meals planned around sale items, but families knew saving cents meant bigger dreams, whether vacations, appliances, or a new family car. Lava lamps, psychedelic posters, and pop art touches crept into suburban homes by the late 60s. Middle-class living rooms, once decorated in wood paneling and floral prints, suddenly glowed with swirling colors. Parents rolled their eyes while teenagers insisted it was modern. The suburbs couldn't escape the counterculture, and even the most traditional households ended up a little groovy. Space-themed shows like Lost in Space or Star Trek lit up TV screens. Middle-class kids sprawled on shag carpets imagining rocket ships and alien worlds. Parents enjoyed the spectacle too, marveling at how far technology had come since their youth. Those shows weren't just entertainment. They carried a sense of possibility, that the future might be within reach. Teenagers learned to drive stick shifts in empty parking lots, stalling, jerking, and finally mastering the clutch. Fathers sat in passenger seats with arms folded, patience tested. For middle-class families, teaching a teen to drive wasn't a luxury. It was a rite of passage. By the end, the car was scratched, but independence was earned. Road trips meant Howard Johnsons, orange roofs easy to spot from highways. Families lined up for fried clams, hot dogs, and ice cream with 28 flavors. Middle-class travelers counted on it like clockwork. The same menu in every town. It was comfort on the road, proof that America could feel both big and familiar at once. Buying new appliances often meant layaway. Middle-class parents picked out refrigerators or washing machines, made payments month by month, and brought the prize home only after the last dollar was paid. There was pride in that patience, a sense that you'd earned it the right way. No credit cards, just discipline and anticipation until delivery day. Drive-through banks amazed middle-class families. You pulled up, put checks or cash in a canister, and watched it whoosh through pneumatic tubes. Kids begged to push the button, staring at the little capsule fly off. Parents marveled at the convenience. proof that even banking could feel futuristic. It was the 60s idea of space-age service. Comic books hidden under covers, flashlights in hand, kids devoured adventures long past bedtime. Middle-class parents shook heads but let it slide, knowing imagination mattered. Superman, Batman, or Archie were more than entertainment. They were escapes. The smell of ink and paper, the thrill of turning pages under the sheets, those nights made stories unforgettable. Saturdays meant roller rinks, with middle-class kids wobbling in rented skates under disco balls. Music echoed, laughter filled the air, and couples held hands while circling the floor. Parents dropped kids off with a few dollars, knowing they'd be safe. Bruised knees came with the territory, but so did memories of freedom, spinning round and round. Coloring books and a fresh box of 64 Crayola crayons turned living room rugs into art studios. The built-in sharpener in the back made it feel like luxury. Middle-class children sprawled across the floor, trading colors and comparing drawings. Parents looked on, proud of little masterpieces taped to refrigerators. Creativity was cheap, but the joy was priceless. High school football games pulled whole towns together. Friday nights, bleachers filled with parents, kids, and grandparents. Marching bands blared, cheerleaders shouted, and the team became the pride of every middle-class household in town. It wasn't just about sports. It was belonging, a shared story under the lights, where winning or losing mattered less than being there. Boys joined Boy Scouts while girls joined Campfire Girls, each learning knots, camping, and community. Middle-class families encouraged it as wholesome fun, a way to teach skills and values. Weekends meant campouts, uniforms pressed, badges sewn by moms. Those groups shaped friendships and character, preparing kids to feel confident whether around a fire or in life.